The streets of New York City were as unforgiving as ever. Cold winds howled through the towering skyscrapers, rattling through alleyways and echoing in the silence of the night. Among the countless souls struggling to survive in the shadows of the American dream, one woman sat on the corner of Fifth Avenue, wrapped in a tattered blanket, her trembling hands gripping a cardboard sign that read, "Hungry, cold, just $1 can help. God bless you." Her name was Eleanor Parker, once a thriving middle-class woman, now reduced to begging for survival. Life had not always been like this. Once she had a house, a job, and a family. But a tragic combination of medical bills, job loss, and an economy that no longer seemed to care for people like her had taken everything away. Now, she was just another invisible face in a city of millions. As she sat there, she saw the luxury cars pulling up outside a grand event at the Plaza Hotel. Dressed in designer gowns and crisp tuxedos, the elite of America were arriving for a prestigious charity gala. A gala ironically aimed at helping the less fortunate. Among the figures stepping out of a sleek black SUV was Barron Trump, the son of the current U.S. President, Donald Trump. At 18 years old, Barron was no longer the quiet boy who had once been in the background of his father's presidency. He had grown into a sharp, well-spoken young man, deeply aware of the world around him. As Barron adjusted the cuff of his tailored suit, his eyes briefly met Eleanor's. Unlike others who averted their gaze in discomfort or disgust, Barron didn't look away. Instead, he stopped. Eleanor, realizing her opportunity, gathered what little dignity she had left and mustered the courage to speak. "Sir, just $1, please." Her voice was weak, hoarse from the cold and hunger. The security detail immediately moved in to usher Barron away, but he held up a hand, signaling them to stop. His sharp blue eyes studied the frail woman before him. He could tell she wasn't just another addict or someone who had never tried to better themselves. She had lived a life before this. Barron reached into his wallet and pulled out not $1, but a crisp $100 bill. He extended it toward her. Eleanor's eyes widened in disbelief. She had expected rejection, maybe even mockery. But here was Barron Trump, offering not just money but something more, acknowledgement. "Ma'am," Barron said, his voice sincere, "how did this happen to you?" Tears welled up in Eleanor's eyes. No one had asked her that in years. That one question would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the nation to its core. Eleanor stared at the crisp $100 bill in Barron's hand, her fingers hesitant to reach for it. She had begged for $1, but here was the son of the most powerful man in America offering her 100 times that. And something far more valuable, genuine curiosity. Her lips trembled as she finally took the bill, gripping it like a lifeline. The cold wind bit at her skin, but for the first time in years, she felt seen. Barron crouched down to her level, ignoring the disapproving glances of his security team and the gala attendees behind him. "Tell me," he repeated, "how did this happen to you?" Eleanor swallowed hard, the weight of her past pressing down on her. "I used to be someone," she whispered. "I had a job, a home, a daughter." Barron's brows furrowed. "What happened?" Eleanor let out a hollow laugh, shaking her head. Life happened." She took a deep breath, as if deciding whether to tell the full story. Then, she did something she hadn't done in years. She spoke about her past. Eleanor Parker, the fall from grace. A decade ago, Eleanor had been a middle-class working mother. She had a steady job as a hospital administrator, a loving husband, and a beautiful daughter named Emma. Their life wasn't extravagant, but it was stable. Then, in the span of just 2 years, she lost everything. First came the medical bills. Her husband, Tom, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, a death sentence wrapped in hospital expenses that insurance barely covered. She spent every penny trying to keep him alive, but in the end, the disease took him. Then came the foreclosure. With her husband gone, Eleanor struggled to pay the mortgage on a single income. Her employer, a private hospital, downsized and she was among those let go. She worked odd jobs, but it wasn't enough. The bank took their home. Then came the hardest part, losing her daughter, With no stable income or home, the court deemed Eleanor unfit to care for 8-year-old Emma. Child Protective Services placed her in foster care. Eleanor fought, she fought, but the system didn't care about a woman with no address and no paycheck. That was 3 years ago. Now Eleanor lived in shelters when she could, on the streets when she couldn't. She hadn't seen her daughter since. Promise from Barron Trump. Barron listened intently, his expression hardening as she spoke. He had grown up in luxury, yet he had always been aware of the struggles of those outside his world. But hearing Eleanor's story firsthand was different. It made the statistics real. "Where's your daughter now?" he asked. Eleanor shook her head. "I don't know. Last I heard, she was with a foster family in Pennsylvania." Barron exhaled, standing up. His security team shifted uncomfortably, ready to escort him inside. The world of wealth and power awaited him behind those grand hotel doors. But Barron wasn't done. "Eleanor," he said firmly, "I want to help you." She blinked up at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. "Help?" He nodded. "Not just you, people like you. People who fell through the cracks of the system. I don't want to just give you money. I want to do something bigger." Eleanor scoffed, though not unkindly. "You're the president's son. What could you possibly do?" Barron smirked, a flicker of determination in his gaze. "You'd be surprised." And with that, he made a decision that would send shockwaves through America. This wasn't just about charity. This was about change. And it all started with a $1 request. Eleanor watched as Barron Trump stood there, his suit pristine, his confidence unwavering. He had power, wealth, and influence, everything she had lost. And yet, for reasons she couldn't understand, he was standing in front of her, listening. Really listening. She had told her story before, but most people either pitied her for a moment before walking away or, worse, judged her. But Barron? He wasn't just feeling sorry for her. He wanted to do something about it. Eleanor sighed, gripping the $100 bill tightly in her hands. She had begged for $1, and in return, she had received something much greater, hope. Barron turned to his security team. "Cancel my appearance at the gala." The lead security officer, a tall, serious-looking man with an earpiece, stiffened. "Sir, we can't do that. Your parents expect you to attend." Barron shook his head. "I don't care. I have something more important to do." The security team hesitated, exchanging glances. One of them pulled out a phone, likely about to call Donald Trump or Melania Trump, but Barron had already turned back to Eleanor. "Come with me." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Go where?" "Somewhere warm," Barron said simply, "and somewhere where we can figure out how to help you." For a moment, Eleanor hesitated. She had learned the hard way that when rich people offered help, there was usually a catch. But something in Barron's eyes told her this wasn't a publicity stunt. This was real. "All right," she said, slowly rising from the ground. The crowd of onlookers that had gathered outside the hotel whispered among themselves. Camera flashes went off as reporters, who had come to cover the gala, quickly turned their attention to the president's son walking away with a homeless woman. It was already making headlines before they even got into the car. The meeting that would change everything. Barron took Eleanor to a private lounge inside one of Trump's many hotels in the city. It wasn't the lavish penthouse suite, but it was warm, comfortable, and stocked with food. For the first time in what felt like forever, Eleanor had a hot meal in front of her. Actual food, not scraps from a soup kitchen. She ate in silence for a moment before looking up at Barron, who was watching her carefully. "So what now?" she asked. Barron leaned forward, his fingers interlocked. "I need to understand why this is happening to people like you. Why is homelessness growing? Why do people lose everything so easily? Why can't they rebuild?" Eleanor wiped her mouth with a napkin, shaking her head. "Because the system isn't built for us." Barron frowned. "What do you mean?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "You think people end up on the streets because they're lazy? Because they made bad choices? No. That's the lie people tell themselves so they can sleep better at night." Barron stayed silent, listening. "The truth," she continued, Most people are one medical bill, one layoff, or one accident away from being like me. They don't think it can happen to them until it does. And once you fall, it's almost impossible to climb back up. Barron's jaw tightened. He had read statistics before, but hearing it from someone who had lived it made it real. So, he said, his voice firm, we need to fix the system. Eleanor let out a dry laugh. Good luck with that. Do you really think politicians care? They'll throw some funding at shelters, give some nice speeches, but nothing really changes. Barron's expression hardened. Then we'll make them care. Eleanor stared at him, unsure whether to be amused or inspired. He wasn't like the other rich people she had met. He wasn't just talking, he meant it. And that was the moment she realized. Maybe, just maybe, Barron Trump was exactly the kind of person America needed right now. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, staring at Barron Trump like he had just declared he would personally end world hunger. You really think you can change the system? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Barron's expression remained steady. Not alone, but with the right people. Yes, Eleanor scoffed. The right people? Kid. I've been living on the streets long enough to know that the right people never give a damn about folks like me. Barron smiled slightly. Then maybe it's time for new people to step up. Eleanor tilted her head. You're serious about this, aren't you? Barron nodded. I don't want to be just another rich kid who does nothing with his privilege. I see the news. I see the protests. America is angry because America is broken. And if no one else is fixing it, then I will. Eleanor exhaled, rubbing her temples. This wasn't what she had expected when she asked for $1. All right, genius, she said. Where do we start? Barron tapped his fingers on the table. We start with your story. Eleanor frowned. My story? Yes, Barron said. People don't care about statistics. They care about people. If I put you in front of the world and let you tell them what's really happening, they'll listen. Eleanor narrowed her eyes. You want to put me in front of cameras? Make me some kind of symbol? Barron met her gaze. I want to give you a voice. One that people can't ignore. Eleanor sat in silence, processing his words. For years, she had been invisible, forgotten, passed over like a piece of trash on the sidewalk. And now, the son of the president wanted to put her at the center of a movement? She should have been skeptical. She should have walked away. But deep down, she knew. This was the only chance she'd ever get to make a difference. Fine, she said. I'll do it. Barron grinned. Then let's get to work. The social media explosion. The next morning, Eleanor's story was everywhere. Barron had filmed a short video of her the night before, where she told her story in her own words. No script, no rehearsals, just raw truth. Barron posted it on his social media accounts, where millions of people followed him, curious about the youngest Trump's opinions. The caption was simple. This is Eleanor Parker. She had a job, a home, a daughter. Now she has nothing. Not because she failed, but because the system failed her. How many more people like her do we ignore every day? Within hours, the video had millions of views. By noon, #Eleanor Parker was trending across the country. By midnight, major news outlets were picking up the story. The public reaction. The responses were overwhelming. Some were outraged. This is disgusting. Why are we letting hardworking Americans fall into homelessness? Some were skeptical. Is this just a publicity stunt from the Trumps? And some were cruel. Maybe if she worked harder, she wouldn't be homeless. Typical sob story. But none of that mattered. People were talking, and that was the first step to real change. Then came the unexpected. Politicians started responding. Senators, Congress members, even presidential candidates began weighing in. Some promised to push for housing reform. Others dismissed Barron's movement as just another media stunt. But Barron didn't care about their opinions. He had America's attention, and he wasn't going to waste it. A call from the White House. As Barron sat in his hotel suite, watching the reaction online, his phone buzzed. Caller ID, the White House. He sighed. He knew this was coming. He answered. Hey, Dad. Donald Trump's voice was sharp. Barron, what the hell are you doing? Barron smirked. Trying to fix what you guys broke. There was silence on the other end. Then his father chuckled. You know, kid, you might just shake things up after all. Barron leaned back in his chair. That's the plan. The day after Eleanor's story exploded across the internet, the entire political landscape shifted. News networks debated whether Barron Trump was a young revolutionary or a naive rich kid playing hero. Some politicians praised him. Others dismissed him. But one thing was certain. He couldn't be ignored anymore. The president's ultimatum. Later that evening, Barron received an official summons to the White House. Not a father-to-son conversation this time. This was a formal meeting with Donald Trump, Melania Trump, and senior advisors. As he stepped into the Oval Office, his father was already pacing. Barron, sit down. Barron took a seat, his back straight, his face unreadable. Donald Trump exhaled, running a hand through his signature hair. You really stirred things up, kid. The media is all over this. Congress is asking questions. Even my political enemies are using your little stunt against me. Barron didn't blink. Good. That means it's working. Trump narrowed his eyes. What exactly is your plan here? You're embarrassing your own family. Melania, who had been silent so far, finally spoke. Donald, let him explain. Barron looked his father in the eye. America is broken, Dad. The rich keep getting richer. The poor get left behind. People like Eleanor are falling through the cracks. And no one in power is doing a damn thing about it. Trump sighed. I get it. But you're going about this the wrong way. Barron leaned forward. Then tell me, what's the right way? Silence. For the first time, Donald Trump had no answer. After a moment, Trump sat down behind his desk. His tone softened. You're playing with fire, son. If you go against the system will fight back. Are you ready for that? Barron's expression was firm. Let them come. Trump studied him for a long moment before shaking his head with a small smirk. You really are my kid, huh? Barron grinned. Always. A new kind of protest. 3 days later, Barron and Eleanor launched Project Rebuild, an initiative aimed at providing direct assistance to homeless individuals while also pressuring lawmakers to enact real policy changes. Their first move? A march on Washington. Not just a protest, a demonstration unlike anything America had seen before. Instead of just activists, Barron and Eleanor mobilized actual homeless individuals from across the country. Thousands of people who had been ignored, pushed aside, and forgotten walked the streets of Washington, D.C., demanding change. Barron led the march himself, the president's son, walking side by side with the homeless. The media went into a frenzy. Live broadcasts showed the massive crowds chanting, "We are not invisible. Fix the system. End homelessness now." For the first time in decades, homelessness wasn't just a side issue in political debates. It was the issue. And it wasn't just a protest. It was a movement. Enemies in high places. But not everyone was happy. Behind closed doors, powerful people were furious. Corporate CEOs, politicians with real estate investments, banks that thrived on foreclosures. Homelessness was profitable for some, and Barron Trump was threatening that. Shut him down, a powerful senator growled during a secret meeting with lobbyists. How? An aide asked. He's the president's son. The senator smirked. Everyone has weaknesses. Find his. And just like that, the war against Barron Trump and Eleanor Parker had begun. As the "We Are Not Invisible" march flooded the streets of Washington, the nation watched in shock. Barron Trump, the son of the sitting U.S. president, was no longer just another privileged heir to a political dynasty. He was leading a revolution. But revolutions make enemies. And Barron had made the worst kind. The political elite, the corporate billionaires, the real estate moguls. They weren't going to let him disrupt the system without a fight. Smearing the movement. The attacks began immediately. Major news networks, ones controlled by powerful interests, began running stories questioning Barron's motives. Is Barron Trump just a spoiled rich kid trying to play hero? Political stunt or genuine concern? Experts debate Barron Trump's homelessness crusade. They dug into Eleanor Parker's past, twisting her story. Meet the woman leading Barron astray, a former drug addict turned activist. Eleanor was stunned. "I've never done drugs in my life," she shouted at the TV. Barron sighed. "They don't care about the truth. They care about stopping us." But the worst attack came from within his own family. Donald Trump's decision. One evening, Barron was summoned back to the White House. This time, it wasn't just his father and mother waiting for him. It was a full room of political advisors, Republican strategists, and wealthy donors. His father sat behind the resolute desk, fingers steepled. "Son, you've put me in a very difficult position." Barron crossed his arms. "Funny. I was about to say the same thing to you." One of Trump's closest advisors leaned forward. "Look, Barron, we respect your passion, but you don't understand how politics work. Change isn't as simple as marching in the streets." Barron scoffed. "Yeah? Because you guys have had decades to fix this, and it's only gotten worse." The advisor frowned. "You're making enemies, son. Dangerous ones." Donald Trump finally spoke. "You need to step down." Barron blinked. "Excuse me?" His father's voice was low but firm. "Drop this movement. Walk away before it ruins your future. If you don't, I can't protect you." Silence. Barron's heart pounded. His father, the most powerful man in the country, was asking him to abandon everything. Barron clenched his fists. "Dad, I thought you loved fighters. You taught me to stand up for what's right." Donald Trump sighed. "I taught you to win." Barron took a deep breath. "Then you should know something, Dad." Trump raised an eyebrow. "What?" Barron met his father's gaze. "I don't plan on losing." And with that, he walked out of the Oval Office, slamming the door behind him. The assassination attempt. 3 days later, at a massive rally in New York City, it happened. Barron stood on stage, speaking passionately about Project Rebuild, promising new solutions for homelessness. The crowd roared with approval. Eleanor stood beside him, a proud smile on her face. And then a gunshot. Chaos. Screams. People running. Barron felt a sharp, searing pain in his shoulder. His body jerked back. Security tackled him to the ground as Secret Service swarmed the stage. Eleanor screamed, "Barron!" More shots rang out as the crowd dove for cover. A lone gunman, later identified as an ex-military sniper, was quickly taken down by security. The last thing Barron saw before he blacked out was Eleanor crying over him. America reacts. The attempted assassination of Barron Trump sent shockwaves through the country. For the first time, people realized just how serious this movement was. This wasn't just politics anymore. This was war. Social media erupted. Someone tried to kill Barron Trump for helping the homeless. Let that sink in. You can assassinate a man, but you can't assassinate a revolution. For the first time in history, a Trump had become the underdog, and the whole world was watching. Barron Trump woke up to the sound of beeping monitors and hushed voices. His body ached. His shoulder throbbed. But he was alive. As his vision cleared, he saw Eleanor sitting by his bedside, gripping his hand. Her eyes were red and swollen. "You scared the hell out of me," she whispered. Barron attempted a weak smile. "Guess that means I'm doing something right." But before Eleanor could respond, the door burst open. Donald Trump. His father stormed into the hospital room, flanked by Secret Service agents. His usual unshakable confidence was gone, replaced with something Barron had never seen before, fear. Trump sat down beside him, running a hand down his face. "Damn it, Barron. Do you see what you've done?" Barron winced as he tried to sit up. "I got shot, Dad. I think the real question is, do you see what they've done?" Trump's jaw tightened. "I told you this would happen. You think these people play fair? They don't. You challenged the system, and they just put a bullet in you." Eleanor stood up. "And that means he should stop fighting?" Trump glared at her. "It means he should stop making himself a target." Barron took a deep breath. "Dad, listen to me. I survived. That means I still have a chance to finish what I started." His father shook his head, exasperated. "You're stubborn, just like me." Barron smirked. So let me fight like you would. There was silence. Then, after a long pause, Donald Trump did something unexpected. He stood up and walked toward the door. Just before stepping out, he glanced back over his shoulder. You want to fight? Fine. But don't expect me to protect you anymore. And then he was gone. Political earthquake. By the time Barron was released from the hospital, the country had erupted into chaos. The assassination attempt had backfired spectacularly. Instead of silencing the movement, it poured gasoline on the fire. Millions of Americans took to the streets in protests even bigger than before. Celebrities, activists, and even rival politicians rallied behind Barron's cause. Social media exploded. They tried to kill Barron Trump, but they only made him stronger. The revolution has begun. If the government won't end homelessness, we will. Meanwhile, political pressure mounted in Washington. Barron's movement had forced Congress to address homelessness and economic inequality in ways they never had before. Suddenly, laws were being proposed. Corporate landlords were being investigated. Funding for mental health programs skyrocketed. But the system wasn't going down without a fight. The people who had tried to silence Barron were now planning something even worse. The scandal that almost ended it all. One evening, as Barron prepared to address a massive rally in Los Angeles, breaking news flashed across every TV screen in the country. Barron Trump caught in secret deal with foreign donors. The president's son accused of accepting millions from unnamed billionaires. The allegations were false, completely fabricated, but the media ran with it. Barron's enemies had found his weakness: public trust. Within hours, people who had once supported him began to question his motives. Was this whole movement just a scam? Is Barron Trump just another corrupt politician in the making? The headlines hit Barron like a sledgehammer. Eleanor paced back and forth in their makeshift campaign office. We need to fight this. If we don't respond now, it's over. Barron exhaled. They want me to crumble. They want me to lose my cool and make mistakes. Eleanor narrowed her eyes. Then what do we do? Barron looked at the cameras setting up outside, ready for his press conference. He took a deep breath. And then he said the one thing that changed everything. We don't defend. We go on the attack. The truth bomb that shook America. That night, Barron Trump walked onto the stage before a sea of cameras. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look defeated. He looked angry. The media is lying to you, he said bluntly. The same people who ignored the homeless crisis for decades are now suddenly worried about where my money is coming from. Let's be real. They don't care about corruption. They only care about stopping me. The crowd erupted in cheers. Barron continued, Here's the truth. I have never taken a dime from any foreign donor. But you know who has? The very politicians accusing me of it. Congress gets rich while you suffer. CEOs make billions while people sleep in the streets. And now they're scared. Because for the first time in history, someone is standing up to them. The moment he dropped the mic, it was over. The smear campaign collapsed overnight. Even his father had to admit Barron had won that round. But the fight wasn't over yet. Because the people in power weren't just going to let him keep winning. They had one last move to make. And it would change America forever. Barron Trump had just delivered the most explosive speech of his life. He had exposed corruption on live television, flipping the script on those who tried to destroy him. His movement was now unstoppable. But power doesn't fall without a fight. And the people in charge weren't done with him yet. The late-night call. It was 2 a.m. when his phone rang. Barron groggily answered. Hello. A deep voice responded. You need to stop. Barron sat up. Who is this? Someone who can make your life very, very difficult. Barron clenched his jaw. You're wasting your time. The voice chuckled. No, Mr. Trump. You are. You think you've won? You haven't even started losing yet. And then the line went dead. Barron sat in silence, staring at his phone. This wasn't a bluff. This was a warning. Enemies in the shadows. Over the next few days, things got worse. First, Barron's personal bank accounts were frozen without explanation. Then, major donors suddenly pulled out of the movement. And then the IRS announced an investigation into Barron and his entire team. It was all a coordinated attack. The government, the banks, the corporations, they were shutting him down before he could change the system. Eleanor slammed a newspaper onto the table. They're trying to starve us out. They know we need funding to keep fighting. Barron nodded. Then we stopped playing by their rules, going underground. That night, Barron made a game-changing decision. Instead of relying on corporations or political donors, he turned directly to the people. A single message went out across social media. They're trying to silence us, but we won't back down. If you believe in this fight, help us keep it alive. Within 24 hours, millions of dollars poured in from everyday Americans. No big donors, no corporate interests, just the people. The system couldn't stop them anymore. Barron had just changed the rules of American politics forever. But the battle wasn't over, because the government had one final move. And this time they weren't playing games. The arrest. 3 days later, the FBI raided Barron's headquarters. Live on television, armed agents stormed in, dragging Barron out in handcuffs. The charge? Conspiracy to incite violence against the United States government. The media erupted. Barron Trump arrested for organizing domestic terrorism? Is Trump's son a threat to national security? Eleanor watched in horror as Barron was thrown into the back of a police van. She knew what this was. Political hit job. The system was trying to erase Barron Trump. But they had just made their biggest mistake. Because when they arrested him, they turned him into a legend. And the people were about to rise up. The moment Barron Trump was arrested, America erupted. The footage of FBI agents dragging him away in handcuffs spread across social media like wildfire. Protests exploded in every major city. Millions of people, rich and poor, young and old, took to the streets demanding his release. Free Barron Trump. End the corruption. The people won't be silenced. The government expected fear. But what they got was a full-blown revolution. Eleanor takes control. Inside a secret location, Eleanor sat in front of a live camera. Barron Trump was arrested because he dared to fight for the people. But this isn't about one man. This is about all of us. They think they can stop the movement by locking him up? No, they just made us stronger. Her words spread like wildfire. Celebrities, independent journalists, and even some politicians broke ranks to support Barron. Meanwhile, the government was crumbling under pressure. They had expected his arrest to silence the movement. Instead, they had created a martyr. And now they had no choice but to respond. The deal with the devil. Inside a high-security detention center, Barron sat across from a man in a black suit. A government official. He slid a document across the table. Sign this, and you walk free. Barron picked up the paper. A full pardon. But there was a catch. He had to end the movement. No more speeches. No more rallies. No more exposing the system. Barron smirked. You're scared, aren't you? The man's expression hardened. We are offering you a way out. If you don't take it, things will only get worse for you. Barron leaned forward. No. Things are about to get worse for you. And with that, he tore the document in half. The trial that changed America. Instead of caving, Barron demanded a public trial. And when the cameras rolled, he exposed everything. Live on national television, he detailed the corruption, the rigged economy, the billionaires controlling Washington. He called out names. He presented evidence. And the American people watched in shock. For the first time, the truth was undeniable. And then the unthinkable happened. A federal judge dismissed all charges against him. The system had failed to silence Barron Trump. And now the real battle was about to begin. The moment the judge dismissed all charges against Barron Trump, the country held its breath. For months, America had been on the edge of chaos or revolution. Now, with Barron free and victorious, the system itself was at a breaking point. Would Washington fight back? Would they strike even harder? Or was this the moment the people took back their country? The turning point. The day after his release, Barron stood before a sea of people in Washington, D.C. It wasn't just a rally. It was the largest protest in American history. Millions had gathered, demanding real change. Barron stepped up to the microphone. He took a deep breath. And then, he made the speech that shook the world. They tried to silence us. They failed. They tried to break us. We are stronger than ever. Today, we stand at a crossroads, where we, the people, decide our own future. The crowd roared. Barron continued. No more corruption. No more homelessness. No more rigged systems designed to keep the rich in power while the rest suffer. We are taking America back. At that moment, something changed. For the first time in decades, Washington listened. The government was forced to act. Sweeping reforms were passed. New laws were introduced, protecting the homeless, breaking up corrupt monopolies, holding billionaires accountable. And the entire country felt the shift. A broken system had been exposed. And now it was being rebuilt. Eleanor's legacy. Through it all, Eleanor remained by Barron's side. She had once been a homeless woman, ignored by society. Now she was a leader and inspiration, a symbol of hope. When Barron launched a national program to end homelessness, Eleanor became its face. No one should be forgotten. No one should be invisible. This is our fight. And together they changed the fate of America. A future rewritten. Years later, as Barron Trump walked the halls of the White House, he looked out over the National Mall. He remembered the journey, the struggles, the betrayals, the sacrifices, and he smiled, because it had all been worth it. America was no longer a country where the powerful crushed the weak. It was a country where the people had finally won. And it had all started with a homeless woman asking for $1.